There is a blue plastic chair on my balcony that has been bleached almost white by the Philippine sun. One leg is shorter than the others, so I keep a folded piece of cardboard under it. Every morning at 6, I sit there with a mug of coffee from Amadeo and listen to the first jeepneys grind up the road below me. Roosters are arguing behind the houses. Somebody is sweeping concrete with a stiff broom. The air smells like damp leaves, diesel, and bread from a bakery 2 streets over. 14 years I have lived here. 14 years. And there is something I have never said out loud to anybody. Not to the men I drink coffee with, not to the neighbors who call me Tito, not even to the daughter whose face now appears on my phone every Sunday morning. I have one regret. It is not the heat. It is not the paperwork. It is not the money I lost during my first year because I trusted a man who said he could get me a better deal on a used car. It is not the brownouts, the traffic, the barking dogs, or the time a gecko fell from the ceiling and landed in my soup. My regret is that I let 7 years pass before I told my daughter why I really left America. You are 73 years old, sitting in a plastic chair 12 time zones away from the place where your only child grew up. And you start to understand that time does not forgive pride. It does not care whether you were embarrassed. It does not care whether you thought you were protecting somebody. It just keeps moving. My name is Walter Hayes. I am 73. I grew up outside Dayton, Ohio, and spent 36 years working in commercial heating and air conditioning. I started as the skinny kid carrying tools and ended as a foreman with a bad right knee, a permanent line of grease under one thumbnail, and the kind of confidence that comes from knowing people call you when an entire building stops breathing. I was good at my job. I was not rich, but I was dependable. That mattered to me more than I can explain. My father used to say a man could survive almost anything as long as he was useful to somebody. For most of my adult life, I believed him. My wife Carol and I were married for 32 years. She taught 2nd grade. She remembered every birthday, every dental appointment, every cousin's new address. I remembered to put gas in the car. Between us, we made one functioning adult. Then Carol got pancreatic cancer. 11 months from the first stomach pain to the funeral. 11 months. People talk about grief like it is crying in a quiet room. Sometimes it is. Mostly it is paperwork. It is passwords you do not know. Medicine bottles you cannot throw away. Casseroles and dishes that belong to people whose names you forget. And bills arriving after the person they were meant to save is already gone. The insurance covered a lot. It did not cover everything. The house had lost value after the market crash, and I had borrowed against it during Carol's treatment. My pension was smaller than I had expected because I retired early to care for her. I still had Social Security coming, but when I sat down with a yellow legal pad and wrote the numbers honestly, I had about $2,180 a month to live on and almost no cushion. The house payment was $1,146. Property tax, insurance, utilities, prescriptions, food, gasoline. There was nothing left. My daughter Emily was 31 then. She lived outside Columbus with her husband Matt and a baby girl named Sophie. Emily wanted me to move closer. She said they could fix up the finished room over their garage. She said it would only be temporary until I got steady again. I heard love, but underneath it, I also heard the word dependent. That was not Emily's word. It was mine. I put it there. I pictured myself eating their groceries, listening for their garage door so I would know when to disappear upstairs, asking before I turned the heat up. I pictured Matt coming home from work and seeing his father-in-law in the same chair every evening. I pictured Sophie growing up believing Grandpa was another responsibility her parents had inherited. I know, famous last words, but I told Emily I had a plan.
I did not have a plan.
For 6 months, I tried everything that felt respectable. I applied for part-time maintenance jobs and was told politely that they needed somebody who could climb ladders all day. I looked at senior apartments. The affordable ones had waiting lists. I met with a man at the bank who used the phrase reverse mortgage so many times it started sounding like a prayer. I sold my fishing boat, then Carol's car, then most of my tools. I even toured a retirement community near Springfield. The woman showing me around was kind. The hallways were clean. There was a puzzle table near the elevator and a calendar full of activities. But every door looked the same, and the dining room smelled like steamed carrots. I sat in my truck afterward with both hands on the steering wheel and thought, is this it? Not because there was anything wrong with the place. There wasn't. What frightened me was how quickly my life had narrowed. Work was gone. Carol was gone. The house was going. My role in the family, at least in my own mind, had changed from father to burden. One night around 2 in the morning, I found a video online made by an American man living in the Philippines. He was not standing in front of a resort. He was sitting on an ordinary porch in a sleeveless shirt, sweating into the camera while a motorcycle went past behind him. He showed his little rented house, his market receipts, and the clinic where he got his blood pressure medicine. He said his rent was less than $300. I watched another video, then another. By sunrise, I had 6 browser tabs open and a notebook full of pesos. At first, I thought it had to be nonsense. Either the man was lying or he was selling something. But then I found forums, old ugly forums with 10-year-old arguments about visas, electricity bills, hospital deposits, and which towns flooded in the rainy season. That is when I started believing it. The people writing were not all wealthy adventurers. Some were retired mechanics, truck drivers, teachers, postal workers, regular people, people like me. I spent 4 months researching. I joined 2 Facebook groups and mostly kept quiet. I learned that foreigners could not simply own land. I learned not to hand money to anybody because they called me brother. I learned that Manila was not the whole country. I learned that cheap could become expensive very fast if you were careless about health insurance, transportation, or relationships. A retired Navy man named Dennis answered one of my questions and told me to look at Tagaytay. Cooler air. Close enough to Manila for major hospitals, far enough away that I would not feel trapped in the city. He sent me photos of Taal Lake and told me not to trust the postcard weather because the fog could roll in and soak everything you owned. For once, I listened. Emily thought I was having some kind of breakdown. Maybe I was. I told her I wanted to try the Philippines for 6 months. She asked why I could not try living near her first. I said I needed to do one thing on my own before I became too old to do anything. That sentence hurt her. I knew it the moment I said it, but pride is a strange machine. Once it starts moving, you keep feeding it just to avoid admitting it should stop. I sold the house for less than I had hoped. After the mortgage and fees, I had $34,700 left. That was my safety net. My entire old life reduced to 1 bank balance and 2 suitcases. I landed in Manila in August of 2012. The airport doors opened and the heat hit me like somebody had laid a wet towel across my face. My shirt stuck to my back before I reached the taxi line. Horns were going in every direction. Families stood behind barriers holding signs. Porters moved around me faster than I could think. I remember gripping the handle of my suitcase and wondering whether I had made the biggest mistake of my life. The drive to Tagaytay took hours because of traffic. By the time we climbed into cooler air, it was dark and raining. Dennis had found me a furnished 1-bedroom apartment behind a family home down a narrow lane not far from the road toward Mendez. The rent was 18,000 pesos a month,
about $425 at the exchange rate then. It included water, basic furniture, and a little balcony with a view of corrugated roofs and banana leaves. 18,000 pesos, $425.
The mattress was thin. The shower had one temperature. Ants found a package of crackers before I did. And when I woke the first morning, fog was pressed against the windows so thick I could barely see the gate. I laughed. It was the first real laugh I had made since Carol died. My first year was not some tropical rebirth. Let me be honest about that. I overpaid for taxis. I bought a used Mitsubishi from a man recommended by a friend of a friend and spent another 90,000 pesos fixing problems he swore did not exist. I got lonely in a way that frightened me. Back in Ohio, loneliness had looked like an empty house. Here, it looked like being surrounded by voices I could not understand. I learned enough Tagalog to be polite, but Tagaytay is full of people from different places, and conversations moved too quickly for me. I missed sarcasm. I missed being able to walk into a hardware store and explain exactly which valve I needed. I missed cold tap water. I missed hearing somebody say Carol's name. But little by little, the place made room for me. The family who owned my apartment had a son named Lito, about 10 years younger than me. He noticed me trying to repair a leaking outdoor faucet with the wrong fitting and stood there smiling until I handed him the wrench. We fixed it together. A week later, he asked if I wanted to go with him to Mahogany Market for bulalo. I said yes, even though I had no idea what bulalo was. It arrived in a metal bowl, steaming hard, with beef shank, corn, cabbage, and marrow in the bone. Rain was hammering the roof. The broth was so hot it burned my tongue. Lito watched me struggle with the marrow and finally took the spoon from my hand like I was a child. That meal cost less than the sandwich I used to buy near work. But the price is not what I remember. I remember being included. That was the beginning. I started helping neighbors with small repairs, never for money, a ceiling fan, a broken latch, a refrigerator that was not cooling because dust had packed around the coils. I showed Lito how to clean an air conditioning unit properly. He showed me which market sellers charged the foreigner price and which ones would tell me the truth. For the first time since retirement, I was useful again. My father had been right about that part. By my third year, my monthly expenses were predictable. Rent had risen to 21,000 pesos. Electricity was around 4,500 if I used the air conditioner carefully. Internet, phone, food, transportation, medicine, and visa costs brought my regular spending to roughly 68,000 pesos a month, about $1,500 at the time. Some months were higher. Hospital visits were never something I treated casually, but I was not drowning anymore. I had breathing room. I had mornings on the balcony. I had people who noticed if I did not come outside. I had a life that was smaller than the one I used to have, but it was mine. And this is where I made the mistake. Because my life improved, I decided the story I had told Emily must have been true. I told myself I had left because I was brave. I told myself she was angry because she did not understand. I told myself she would come around. We spoke every few months at first. The calls were stiff. She would hold baby Sophie up to the camera, and I would wave at a child who did not know me. Emily asked when I was coming home to visit. I always had a reason to wait. The airfare was high. My visa renewal was coming. I had a dental problem. Rainy season made travel difficult. The truth was simpler. I was ashamed. I had not told Emily how bad the money situation had become before I left. I had not told her about sitting in the truck outside that retirement community. I had not told her that I could not bear the thought of needing her. Instead, I made the move sound like a grand late-life adventure. And when she challenged me, I acted as though she was trying to control me. Every year that passed made the truth harder to say. Sophie turned 1, then 2, then 5. Emily stopped asking when I would visit. That should have scared me more than her anger did. In 2019, 7 years after I arrived, I had a health scare. I was carrying groceries up the steps when a pressure spread across my chest and into my jaw. I sat down on the concrete and could not catch my breath. Lido found me and drove me to a hospital in Silang. It turned out not to be a heart attack, but until the doctor said those words, I believed I might die in a place where my daughter would have to identify me through a phone call. That night, under fluorescent light with a plastic bracelet around my wrist, I finally understood what pride had cost me. Not money, time. I called Emily the next morning. She answered with, "Dad, are you okay?" And I started crying before I could speak. I told her everything: the debt, the house, the pension, the room over the garage that I had been too proud to accept. I told her I had heard the word burden even though she had never said it. I told her I had used the Philippines to save myself financially, then used distance to avoid admitting I was scared. She was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, "I thought you left because being near us was not enough for you. There are sentences that rearrange your whole life." That was one of them. I had spent 7 years protecting my dignity, while my daughter spent 7 years believing she had been rejected. We did not fix everything in one call. Real life does not work like that. She was angry. I apologized, then ruined the apology by explaining too much. We tried again a week later, then again. Sometimes we talked for 10 minutes, sometimes an hour. In 2020, travel plans disappeared with the pandemic. That felt like punishment, although I know the whole world was carrying its own grief. Emily and I kept talking. Sophie, now old enough to be curious, started asking me questions about volcanoes, geckos, and why people put cheese in sweet bread. I mailed her postcards. She sent me drawings. In late 2022, Emily finally came to visit with Matt and Sophie. I stood at the arrivals area in Manila holding a sign I had made, even though they knew what I looked like. My hands were shaking. When Emily came through the doors, she looked older than the version of her I had kept in my head. Of course she did. So did I. She hugged me, but not like the movies. There was hesitation in it, history. Then Sophie, 11 years old and nearly as tall as her mother, said, "Grandpa Walter, do you really have lizards in your kitchen?" I said, "Only the polite ones." That broke something open. They stayed for 12 days. I showed them Tal Lake from the ridge when the sky was clear. We ate balalo at Mahogany Market. Lido's family cooked too much food and acted as though they had known Emily all her life. Matt helped me replace the cardboard under the blue chair with a proper rubber foot, although I put the cardboard back after they left because the chair did not feel right without it. One evening, Emily and I sat on the balcony after everybody else went to bed. Fog moved through the streetlights. She asked whether I regretted moving. I told her no, and I meant it. The Philippines did not steal 14 years from me. It gave me 14 years I am not sure I could have afforded emotionally or financially back in Ohio. It gave me friends, routine, purpose, and the chance to become something other than a widower staring at bills in an empty house. I do not regret coming here. I regret making my daughter pay for the shame that brought me here. I regret letting a solvable misunderstanding harden into 7 lost years. People ask me about retirement abroad, and they usually want numbers. How much is rent? What does health care cost? Can you live on Social Security? Those questions matter. They matter a lot. Today, I pay 26,000 pesos in rent, around $450 depending on the exchange rate. My full monthly budget is usually between $1,700 and $1,900. I keep an emergency fund. I carry insurance. I do not lend money I cannot afford to lose. But there is another cost nobody puts in the spreadsheet. Distance magnifies whatever you refuse to say. If you leave angry, the anger comes with you. If you leave ashamed, the shame sits beside you on the plane, A cheaper apartment does not make you honest. Palm trees do not repair a family. You still have to make the call. So now, every Sunday morning at 6, I sit in that blue plastic chair with coffee from Amadeo. The jeepneys grind up the road. Roosters argue. Somebody sweeps concrete. My phone rings and Emily appears on the screen. Sometimes Sophie joins from college prep classes, rolling her eyes when her mother tells a story. Sometimes we say almost nothing important. That is the miracle of it. We have ordinary conversations again. 14 years in the Philippines taught me how little a person truly needs. A safe room, enough food, medicine, and a few people who notice when the light in your window does not come on. It also taught me that dignity is not the same as never needing anybody. Dignity is telling the truth before time tells it for you. That is the only thing I regret. I waited 7 years to learn it. 7